I'm Andy Agathangelo. I'm the founder of the social enterprise Transparency Task Force, which advocates for the consumer interest in financial services. Our work is read and engaged with by people in 20 countries around the world, but roughly 80% of the 5,000 or so people who get our comms each week are individuals based in the UK. We have several sub-brands, as we call them. One of them, as you can see, is the Woodford Campaign Group. We started that 2 or so years ago because we recognised that there wasn't a group speaking up for the interests of Woodford victims other than individuals who were in some way connected to particular law claims that were going on. But we decided it would make a lot of sense to create a safe environment where people could talk. The Woodford Campaign Group has its own Facebook group. If you're a victim of Woodford, the Woodford scandal, and you're not yet a member of that Facebook group, please do join it. Okay, the big news this week, of course, relating to Woodford is the FCA's announcement, and there is so much to talk about in relation to that. I'm going to share my screen and take you to something which you may be familiar with already, but this is the open letters page on the Transparency Task Force website. You'll see we frequently write open letters. They do get a lot of attention. They, in fact, go all the way back to, I think, when we started in 2015. So lots of open letters. We tend to write open letters when something important has happened and we want to respond to it. So that's the general context. And we wrote one just yesterday. Yesterday, crikey, seems like a long time ago now. We wrote one to Sir Christopher Wormald. It's not particularly long, so I'm going to read it out. And in doing so, it's also going to set the scene quite nicely for the bulk of today's conversation. So to Sir Christopher Wormald from the Woodford Campaign Group and Transparency Task Force. Dear Sir Christopher Wormald, I write to you in your capacity as Chair of the Honours Forfeiture Committee, in my capacity as co-founder of the Woodford Campaign Group and founder of the Transparency Task Force, both of which advocate the consumer interest. This matter relates to our previous request to you that Neil Woodford, Commander of the Order of the British Empire, should forfeit his CBE because of the terrible harm the Woodford scandal has caused. The rationale for this respectful request to you is set out in detail in this webpage about our petition to you. I'll go to that link in just a moment, which at the time of writing has 511 supporters. If you wish to understand in greater detail why so many people believe that Mr. Woodford's honour should be forfeited, please read the thorough report on the Woodford scandal that has been produced by the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Investment Forward and Fairer Financial Services from page 30. And please note that the Transparency Task Force provides the secretariat to the APG. Again, we're going to be going to that report for particular reason in due course. This scandal is obviously a matter of great public interest. Hundreds of thousands of people have been directly impacted by it, many having lost life-changing amounts of money. Furthermore, the scandal indubitably impacted the reputational integrity of the UK's investment sector as a whole, with inevitable adverse effects on trust and confidence in investing, and thereby damage to the growth prospects of the UK economy. Indeed, it could even be argued that there is a certain irony in Mr. Woodford having been awarded a CBE for services to the economy. The reason for writing to you today is that we have been previously advised that the Honours Forfeiture Committee will hold back on making a decision regarding the forfeiture of Mr. Woodford's CBE until any regulatory investigation has been completed. I'm pleased to advise that the FCA has today announced their decision as follows. Woodford being fined £5,888,800 and ban him from holding senior manager roles and managing funds for retail investors. And secondly, the FCA has also decided to fine Woodford Investment Management £40 million. As such, this is a key line here, I believe there is no longer a reason for your forfeiture committee to delay making a decision. And given that the Financial Conduct Authority's judgment is so critical of Mr. Woodford. I hope the decision-making process you follow might be both straightforward and swift. Will you grant our request, please? Etc., etc., etc. So that was the open letter sent within, I'm guessing, about an hour or so of the FCA making the announcement. I mentioned, I'll go to a few of the links. First of all, I'm going to go to this link here. This is the Honours Cabinet Committee, and all the links I'm referring to, I will be putting in the chat. Okay. The second link is to the web page about the petition. Now, this is very, very important. We started this web page a while ago. It explains very simply and very clearly the rationale behind our request, our collective request, that the CBE that Mr. Neil Woodford has be withdrawn, be forfeited. And I'm going to obviously invite everybody who can to support it, to sign it. If you haven't yet done so, please make sure you do. Of course, if for whatever reason you don't want to support it, that's absolutely fine. But the more signatures we have, the easier it is to argue that this is a public interest issue. So I'll put the link to that in the chat in due course. Going back to our letter, it's here. I'm also going to make direct reference to the next link, which is the APPG's report. Now, to give you all a bit of context, in November last year, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Investment, Fraud and Fairer Financial Services, which Transparency Task Force provided Secretariat for, produced a highly critical report on the Financial Conduct Authority. You could summarise the FCA's response to the report by saying that the FCA said the issues raised in the report were old issues that are no longer relevant because the matters have been dealt with. That's a very brief, simplistic summary. What the APPG decided to do was to produce a supplementary report with each new edition refuting the notion that the FCA's issues have been sorted out. So what that meant was we produced a case study, we being the APPG in this context, a case study all about the Woodford scandal, which, as you can see, is here. Please do read it if you haven't already done so. It's very, very powerful. It's very, very detailed. A huge amount of work went into it. Now, regarding the report itself, and the reason I'm explaining this report that's now a few months old, is because in the report, there's a section called version control, which I'm going to read out. This is a supplementary report to the APPG on Investment, Fraud and Fairer Financial Services report on the FCA. The supplementary report is being published in instalments. Ultimately, the full set of instalments in the supplementary report will bring into focus whether the FCA is a very different organisation, as claimed by current FCA CEO Nikhil Rathi. In his response to our November 2024 report, a statement, the evidence shows we must refute. We genuinely believe, folks, that the evidence shows that the FCA is not, as claimed by the CEO, a very different organisation. This supplementary report and the original report will also hopefully signal to the FCA's replacement CEO, who, according to comments in the press, is expected to take control of the organisation in October this year. And that's interesting looking back, because we were all expecting there to be a new CEO. But for reasons we could speculate about, the new CEO of the FCA is the old CEO. In other words, Nikhil Rathi got another term, so to speak. I might touch on the speculation around that in due course, but for the moment, that's the context. We have the same CEO running the FCA. Now, the reason we have this version control bit in here is because what it enables us to do is treat this document as a living document. In other words, as things happen, we can update the report. We can update this analysis of the FCA's performance. So it says here, 3rd of February, we did whatever we did. 25th of March, we did whatever we did. Blah, 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 blah. So over the course of, I'm guessing, the next week or two, this latest development regarding the FCA's handling of the Woodford scandal, and hopefully, if it happens in time, the Forfeiture Committee's response to the request to have Neil Woodford CBE to be removed will be added to the report. So, surprise, surprise, folks, you know what's coming. I'm going to be looking for volunteers to help me create that new version of the report to take into account the most recent developments. Now, does anybody have anything they want to say in direct commentary to anything I've said so far? Don't take it on any other tangents. Don't go into any new territory. But does anybody have any commentary on anything I've covered so far? Please raise your hand if you do. I'll quickly go on gallery mode to make sure I can see everybody. I think we're good. All right, okay. So I'm assuming everyone's up to speed with what I've said so far and everyone's comfortable with it. So expect an email or an invitation to volunteer to help with that next stage of the report. I think you all know that TTF is very under-resourced, so most of what we do through harnessing people power, people volunteering to do things that need to be volunteered for. I'm going to refer to the chat because in the chat we've got some notes here. Imogen has very kindly put her notes in the chat, her email address and her phone number. She says, if you'd be happy to speak to me, the stories for the Sunday Times, I've heard of the Sunday Times, and everything will be dealt with sensitively. Nabil says, the Guardian article today also pointed that the FCA's ruling is only provisional and Woodford and Wynne have referred the decision notices to the upper tribunal to challenge them. Most definitely, Nabil is correct. We'll talk about that. Neil Taylor, who's one of the founders of the campaign group, said, my name is Neil Taylor. Happy to speak with you, Imogen. My wife and I invested in, and he goes into detail with some concrete details. So well done, Neil Taylor. Can I please invite everybody to thank Neil and also everyone else that's stepping forward to speak to Imogen? There are, of course, other publications as well, and others may also want to speak to folks. So let it be known if you're happy to speak to a journalist, be that Imogen or anybody else. Beryl says, I've emailed you. That's great, Beryl, well done. Digger, who's great, has also provided us details. So too has Mark Brown. Fantastic. Well done. Absolutely well done. Ian, your call to arms has obviously helped there. That's really, really brilliant. Okay, I'm going to go back to Ian Duffield now to invite Ian to, as succinctly as you can, Ian, give us your thoughts on the FCA fining Woodford, fining Wynne, and anything else that relates to recent issues. It makes sense we focus on the recent, please, Ian. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, we are finishing at 6, aren't we? So I'll try to keep it succinct. Imogen very kindly listened to me yesterday for quite some time. Thank you again, Imogen. Yeah, I note with interest that assuming that Woodford and Wynne don't have success in their appeal, and it's very interesting that in some of the other financial journals that have come out over the last day or so, is that on one, bizarrely enough, Woodford declined to speak, but his company, Woodford Investment Management, decided to speak on his behalf. It's a bit strange because that's Woodford. There was only two people involved in that company, and that was Woodford and his partner, Newman, both of whom are, as far as I'm concerned, particularly unsavoury characters. What I know, interestingly, is that there's a fine against Woodford just short of £6 million. And my understanding is that in the year that the fund closed, he walked away with about 100 million. So it's not a particularly significant fine in the scheme of things. But strangely, Woodford Investment Management have been fined £40 million. Now, Woodford Investment Management, as of yesterday, was currently showing that its balance sheet was in a deficit to the tune of nearly £250,000. A year ago, it was slightly positive, I think, to the tune of about £1,500. So my guess is that Woodford Investment Management has amassed creditors of close to £250,000, probably backed by Woodford's personal guarantee, because I can't see why anybody would touch Woodford Investment Management with a barge pole if it wasn't, because it has no money. And therefore, I'm assuming that that is what's been used to finance Woodford 4.0, which is the platform approach he's trying to take and currently signing people up for that. What I will find interesting is that if that fine does get put against Woodford Investment Management, WIM, it is likely, very likely, that the company will fold. The interesting part about that is that if it goes into a formal administration, somebody might want to look at the historical accounting, because again, this is my understanding. I don't have personal knowledge of it, but Woodford's partner Newman took out a loan from
Yeah.
Woodford Investment Management in the region of £1 million. And my understanding is also that that loan was written off. And seen as it's Woodford and Newman who sign off on the accounts, that doesn't seem very savoury. And it sounds very much like that Woodford Newman has been shown preferential treatment in accounting terms for £1 million loan that was written off by, wait for it, probably Newman. So that will be interesting turn of events. And as far as I'm concerned, that is about as close to fraud as you can probably get. As to whether it actually crosses the threshold into fraud, that would be for other people to decide on. But it would be interesting to see if it does go into administration, how any subsequent administrator deals with what looks to me to be preferential treatment. And I think that's it from me. Thank you. But thank you again to everybody who has now volunteered to give interviews to Imogen. That's great.
Thank you, Ian. That's really good. I've got some questions and I'll be very keen to get folks' thoughts on it. Um, if you look at the accounts of Woodford Investment Management from last year, there wasn't much money in there at all. Certainly not the sorts of money that the FCA is coming at it for in terms of a fine. Question, folks: would anybody like to comment on why the FCA might be looking to fine Woodford Investment Management an amount of money that any preliminary research would suggest there's no possible way the organisation could pay? We'll go straight back to Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a very strong view on that. And I think the result of this will be that the FCA will say what a fantastic job they've done in actually finding a scandalous operation like that, £40 million, when it's got sod all. It's a nonsense. And I think this is just being done by the FCA so they can say, there, look, we've taken significant action against this man and his company who were involved in the Woodford scandal, but it's 40 million of that 45 million and some change is totally meaningless because it's been levied against a company that has no assets. In fact, it only has debts. So I think they will be giving themselves a round of applause, which will sound very, very empty if people actually think about any prospects of that £40 million fine actually coming in.
In which case, what you're suggesting, Ian, and I'm inclined to agree with you, it is almost a performative gesture for marketing purposes, for reputational purposes for the FCA, rather than for the practical purposes of getting money fined by an organisation.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it. I'm actually saying it.
Okay, thank you. And a related question to this: if WIB is fined that amount of money, and on the basis it can't afford to pay it, it will go insolvent, presumably. Under normal circumstances, that would then make WIM an organisation that was dealing in regulated financial services that's now insolvent, that's got people who've lost out as a consequence of what it did. Under normal circumstances, of course, that would take us into the financial services compensation scheme. Is that right?
It should do. It should do if it wasn't for the clause that was put into the scheme of arrangement, which, wait for it, was agreed by the FCA with Link Fund solutions, which meant that the ricochet effects would stop anybody going to the financial services compensation scheme. But it does occur to me that when one takes a look at the post office scandal and the fact that Parliament was able to step in and make certain changes to the law to allow people who had been wrongfully convicted and imprisoned get back out of jail, I see no reason why Parliament shouldn't step in and reverse the decision by the FCA, which was shameful and a complete betrayal of consumers, in simply covering their own backs for the shameful acts that they didn't take. And also shameful that retail investors, consumers, a significant number of which will be of advanced years, like myself, lost so much money because of the shenanigans that Woodford and Woodford Investment Management got up to, and the complete failure by the FCA to stop it.
Thanks, Ian. So for those that may not know the background to this, I know the Woodford folks will, but others may not. The background to this is a scheme of arrangement was organised that the FCA was involved in developing, that the court decided was the big question mark over whether it was legit or not, but yet haven't got time to go there. But the outcome of that arrangement meant that consumers who did until that point in time have a statutory right to go to the financial ombudsman and the financial services compensation scheme were denied those once deemed to be inviolable rights put in place by the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000. So effectively, if this line of thought is correct, had the FCA done, let's say, a year and a half ago, what they chose to do yesterday, the Woodford investors would have been properly compensated through the FSCS.
Yeah,
the question then becomes, what, if anything, did the FCA learn that was meaningful in the last, let's say, 18 months since the court case that they didn't know before? And that takes us into really interesting territory. And I'll put it as a question, have the FCA acted in bad faith to prevent a claim on the FSCS, which would have been circa, we say, 15 billion, which would have brought such a huge amount of reputational damage for the FCA, because the industry, you imagine, would have said, why are we once again being asked to pay for what is in effect a regulatory failure tax, and could potentially have brought down the FCA? Did the FCA do the things they did in the order they did them to try to save their own necks at the expense of Woodford investors? Would anybody like to come in on that particular narrative? I'm looking at folks like Alan Pyatt or Neil Taylor or Linda or Deborah or anybody. So please do. Neil Taylor, thank you, sir. Thank you.
I may not answer your questions, but can I put my thoughts down? I thought the fine was relatively small, 40 million, to be honest. I mean, because some of these guys actually invested 1 billion in funds which are not appropriate for an equity fund. You know, it's a huge amount of losses that we've picked up because of that. And 40 million is sort of small, isn't it? It's a small contribution. And you consider, I mean, if you thought about the three players involved, Hargreaves, Woodford's and Wim, and Northern Trust, you could argue as well to some extent, as well as Link Fund Solutions. Even if you spread it 3 or 4 ways, you know, we take a bit as well. It should have been a couple of 100 million. I would have thought 250 million or something. It seems a little bit light to me in terms of numbers, you know. Obviously, it's contested amount. It's going to go through the court process. It might take a couple of years to resolve, and we all know that. So it's only a theoretical amount at the moment. You know, he may win the case. You know, if he fights it. The other question is, does Wim have PII cover? Does it have professional indemnity cover to cover himself? I'm sure he's got some. So I don't know what extent that would cover him anyway.
Thanks, Ian, very much. Sorry, forgive me. Thank you, Neil. I think I'm right in saying that the analysis of the insurance cover held by the firm deemed that it was massively underinsured, and that in and of itself was one of the regulatory failures. They should have had the correct amount of insurance to cover the potential liabilities that they had. It turned out they only had a fraction of it. I think I'm right in saying that, and it's actually covered in
On whim, that is, on whim you're talking
yes,
about.
indeed. Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes,
Because
indeed.
it certainly was on LFSL, the Link Fund Solutions. They only had £48 million worth of cover, so they were grossly underinsured. I don't know about whim.
I'm also putting in the chat some comments that a colleague helped with. Why are the findings limited to liquidity? Bracket style drift and undisclosed connected party transactions matters much more and cause more loss. That's a really important question. Why has the FCA's work only really focused on liquidity issue when it's only one of the component areas for harm? Why is so little of the fine on Neil Woodford and none on Newman? And above all, why no redress for the victims? Of course, had the £40 million wind fine been a redress payment to investors, it would have been paid out despite the coming insolvency because it would have fallen to the FSCS. Such a powerful point, and that's you may recognise the work there by my wonderful colleague Mark Bishop, who many of you know. We're going to jump back to Ian Duffield, then we're going to throw it open. Anything else on the Woodford situation, Ian? Thank you.
Yeah, I think they are acting in bad faith. They made the point when the scheme of arrangement was in play and prior to being approved, they actually said that they would only release the result of their investigation after the approval of the scheme of arrangement. Now, after that, I never saw the full extent of their investigation and still haven't. And if anybody knows where it is, please let me know, because I would like to take a look at it. And then they announced that they were going to be looking at Woodford, or at least they issued a warning notice that they were going to be looking at Woodford and Wynn, and then have spent a further 2 years in doing that. What they were looking at in that 2 years, over and above what they'd already looked at in the previous 5, is sort of a little bit beyond me as to why it did take them that long. But given the order of events, that they first of all wouldn't release the finding, and tied in with that desperately misleading statement about the 77 pence in the pound, when they'd already lowballed massively the losses from 1.1 billion down to something in the region of 300 million, and then dropped it again further lower, does really make this paltry fine against a company that has no assets a farce. Because that's what it is, as far as I'm concerned. It's a complete farce so they can run around waving banners saying, yeah, look what we've done. We've taken significant action here, against an organisation which is basically a man of straw.
Thank you very much indeed.
Neil's right about the insurance level. It was 40 odd million, but that was on Link Fund Solutions. I don't know whether WIM had any. I would expect it to, given the fact that it would be very foolish of Woodford to go into business without that in place. But I don't know what the level was. But because they never actually found anything against Woodford the first time round, that wouldn't have triggered, because there was no fine levied on him at the time. It's only just been levied now. And my guess is probably, given the fact that it's had no money, it won't have been paid its premiums. So there won't be any professional indemnity liability falling to an insurance policy that's probably no longer in place.
Thank you, Ian. Let's talk about the time frame issue. It's many, many, many years after the event. Would anybody like to share any comments on how long it's taken the FCA to get to this point here? Preferably somebody coming in fresh. Linda, I think you raised your hand. Please do, Linda. Thank you.
Really to comment that I find it unbelievable that it's taken the FCA so long to reach and publish its conclusion. And the sequence of events, including the sale of LF Link Services, and the agreement they reached. One shouldn't talk about conspiracy theories, but it does start to reek a bit, I think. The other thing I would say is I started to read the FCA findings. I haven't finished it yet. Ian, you were asking, have you seen the FCA findings? They're published on the FCA website.
Was that something they put on there today, Linda? Was that?
Yes.
Yeah, I sent that, Andy. I sent that yesterday to the Woodford 7, including you. It was both the Woodford statement on Woodford, which is 120 pages long, and then there's one for Wim as well.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Linda, for that. I'll pick that up.
So it's just, if you look at the sequence of events and the timings, it just absolutely stinks. As the point you've made, Andy. I can't. No investigation into something as specific as that would take that long.
I understand. Thank you for sharing those views, Linda. I'm inclined to absolutely agree with you. Thank you, Linda. Alan Pyatt, please do chip into the conversation. What are your thoughts? Have you had a chance to look at the document you just referred to?
I haven't as well. I did see it yesterday, and I started reading it. And I thought, God, 120 pages. There's a lot of thud factor here.
Right.
I suspect the FCA delayed the report because of what was going on with Link Fund Solutions, but that finished a long, long time ago. So they've had plenty of time to get it out since then. But it's like a lot of things, though. Governments do it and organisations do it. They try and put bad news out, when there's other bad news around, as it were.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that they should have put it out at the same time as the High Court decision about the car finance initiative from that side of it. As far as the fines are concerned, I agree with what everybody said. It's concerning that they've done it against a company that doesn't seem to have the money, unless they know otherwise. And I'd like to see, I haven't seen that much on the BBC, and I'd like to have seen, Nicky Rathi actually explain himself on the TV and be asked some more questions. Why have you put such a large amount of money about a company that can't pay? What's going to happen? Because, of course, because of the SOA, they can't then say, we fined them 40 million, the company's gone bust. But the SOA has now trumped it. High Court told us we can't pay out on the FCS, so our hands are tied. Yeah, I think they're going to go down that route.
I think you're right. And folks, does anybody feel suspicious, as I do, that the Woodford announcement came very, very shortly after the car finance announcement, which has caused Nicky Rathi to be on TV a few times and quite a bit of activity in the press? I wonder if either the Woodford development has been used in an attempt to deflect attention away from the car finance scandal. That's one theory. Or that by getting it out now, it all kind of gets squashed in the overall noise about the car finance scandal. It just seems rather unusual to me that such massive announcement has occurred so close to a Supreme Court decision, and when we believe the FCA was working all weekend deciding what to do. We're going to go back to Ian Duffield. Ian.
I think that's exactly what's happening here. It's a favourite trick of Donald Trump, and he's doing it as we speak, where he just makes certain, because there's so much noise about Epstein, he tries to create as much noise as he can about anything else, including actresses and adverts and anything he can throw into the mix to get the media talking about it, working on the principle that lifespan in the media is a matter of just a few days, and just keep talking about something else till it goes away. And I think that's exactly what the FCA have done. The other aspect, you put a comment in the chat, Andy, about the liquidity issue, and that is really very interesting and absolutely right on the point, because they lowballed the losses in the case of Link Fund Solutions and set it initially around 300 million, when in fact it was 1.1 billion. But the comment that was made at the time was that they only considered the liquidity issue, that the other factors were down to, they used the term market performance. Now, if you take a look at the all share index for those 5 years after the market, after the fund was suspended, the all share index rose every single year, and over that 5 years increased by 25%. So the idea that there was market underperformance going on at that time is a nonsense. The fact is, it was the fund performance it was the fund that underperformed, and that underperformed because Woodford bought illiquid and unlisted assets that A, weren't paying dividends, and B, couldn't be sold. And that in itself led to not only the liquidity, but the inevitability that organisations that knew what was going on or found out what was going on, typically Kent Council and others, because retail investors didn't know because no one was talking to us and we're not close enough. But I found out very soon after that collapsed. I spoke to the CEO of AJ Bell, the other big platform, again, along with Hargreaves Lansdowne. And he said to me that everybody in the industry knew what Woodford was doing, and AJ Bell themselves steered clear of it. He said that to me, whereas Hargreaves Lansdowne heavily promoted it. And the same issue is there, that it's that failure to operate according to the mandate of the prospectus and exceeding the limits in illiquid assets that not only caused a liquidity issue, but that liquidity issue forced the big organisations to make redemptions, and therefore they couldn't make redemptions. So it's a downward spiral from then on, and also led to the losses. So everything was down to Woodford investing money in illiquid and unlisted companies. So it wasn't that, it's not separate. It's not market underperformance. It's fund underperformance for exactly the same reason that the liquidity issue happened. So that 1.1 billion should all have been included. Okay, yes, there were some distributions, but based on the fact that people only got 50% of their money back or thereabouts on the distributions, the final losses were in the region of £500 million, and not the assessed lowballed figure that the FCA worked on, which they then further reduced.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. In a few minutes, folks, I think we'll wrap up the Woodford situation and talk about more generic things and other matters. I'm just
Andy, can I just add something?
Please do, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I haven't obviously read the report, but what I don't quite understand, just reading in the newspaper this morning before I went off, I can't understand the distinction between the company and Woodford, and therefore why it is that he's been fined only the 5 point whatever it is million, and the company's been fined the 40 odd million. So I don't understand the distinction and the approach of the FCA in relation to the basis upon which the fine's been levied. And the other irritating thing that I found with the FCA was that every time you contacted them, they said, we're looking into it. Yeah. And I kept on saying that we're running out of time because there's a limitation period. And of course, this report's been published after the limitation period.
David, thank you. There's lots of reasons to sort of smell a rat here. Either something's happened that's not quite right, and using very polite language, or it's a remarkable set of instances, isn't it? It really is a remarkable set of instances. If you were looking for a pattern, the pattern seems to be that every decision made by the FCA has been made in such a way that it will favour the FCA's position at the expense, knowingly at the expense of the Woodford investors. And in that, I do include the matter that Ian mentioned earlier, the misleading characterisation of investors getting 77p in the pound off the back of this arrangement. Thank you very much.
Andy, can I just say a thing? I haven't read this whole document yet, but in the FCA fine to Woodford on page 26, section 4.3, they show a chart showing the total value and the unquoted securities percentage of his fund, every month from June 14 through to it closed. And according to this, it never goes above 10%, which we know is the legal limit. So if they aren't even saying he broke the liquidity rules, they're saying he kept to them, which is very strange because I don't think he did. And it says here, it looks like it's only 4%. When it closed, only 4% of the fund was in a liquid stock, which I can't believe. I'd have to look at the numbers, but that seems low. But anyway.
Andy, if I can come back in on that very, very quickly. In the book that Owen Walker published, which I've not heard anybody suggest that he got anything wrong, it was a fantastic book. The Woodford was having to report on a daily basis towards the end on the liquidity, and he breached the threshold limit of 10% on multiple occasions, and at one point it got to over 20%, and I believe right at the end it was close to 35% because all the liquid assets were having to be sold off to meet the redemptions until the final 10 million that was asked for back by Kent Council couldn't be met. And it because it just wasn't possible to sell enough funds because there was so little left. So it must be the case that it was well above that 10% limit at the end, because that was why the fund was suspended. It had no money, and so it had no liquid assets sufficient to meet the County Council redemption.
Is it conceivable the FCA is working from the wrong data? I mean, that would be bizarre. Mr. Neil Taylor. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I remember Lee Day putting their detailed claim together, and at the end of the it breached it in 2018 first. There's some breaches in 2018 of the 10% limit, but at the end it was closer to 21%. It was closer to 21% of it was at the time of it was suspended. It was 21% of the value of the assets which was illiquid.
Thanks, Neil. Thank you. I'm going to invite Imogen and then Guy, journalists, to chip into the conversation if they want to. I'm expecting a no, but as a courtesy, I'm just inviting folks from the press to either make comments or ask questions if they would like to. Imogen, if you'd like to come in at this point, feel free to do so. And Guy, if you'd like to come in at this point, feel free to do so. Okay, on that point, we'll wrap up the section on Woodford. I'll kind of close it because we'll go on to other matters in just a moment. So there endeth our conversation about the latest iteration of the Woodford investment scandal. We'll get this out on social media as a recording, and please do share it. Thank you very much.